Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a fascinating, highly structured, and honestly pretty esoteric framework that predicts the ultimate destiny of humanity. And get this, it specifically pinpoints the year 2026 as a critical, unavoidable time of global reorganization. Now, whether you end up viewing this as a literal spiritual cosmology, a really intriguing philosophical metaphor, or just a wild thought experiment, our goal today is simply to map out exactly what this source material is claiming and how on earth it arrives at its startling conclusion.
So, right off the bat, you're probably wondering, why 2026? What makes this specific year such a game changer? Well, to really grasp this heavily emphasized warning, we have to zoom way out. We need to look at the speaker's overarching timeline of human history. According to this framework, we are currently entering a massive reorganization period. But to understand why the universe is supposedly forcing this transition on us right now, we kind of have to look at how humanity was fundamentally built from the ground up.
Let's start with Phase 1, evolution and growth.
The framework kicks things off by splitting all of human history into two distinct developmental phases, and the difference in scale here is absolutely staggering. According to the source, the evolution phase took hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years. Basically, humanity was operating on pure survival instinct, agonizingly slowly reaching about 30% of our ultimate developmental readiness. But then boom, an explosive shift happened. The growth phase kicked in, rapidly pushing humanity up to 70% readiness and planting the metaphorical seeds of knowledge and culture all across the globe.
But here's the catch, and it's a massive cosmic problem according to the source. While people successfully absorbed vast amounts of this newly planted knowledge, becoming technically smarter and culturally richer, the framework argues we totally dropped the ball on organizing it for the greater good. Essentially, we hoarded information without creating any harmony. We got exceptionally clever, sure, but we used that intellect primarily to dominate one another rather than bringing order to the human race. And in this cosmology, that kind of imbalance, it practically guarantees a cosmic intervention.
That brings us to Phase 2, the tree metaphor and pruning. To explain how the universe actually steps in to correct this failure, the speaker uses a really striking, totally unconventional visual metaphor for global geography. Picture the entire human population as one single giant ancient tree. The expansive branches, those represent the West. The sturdy trunk represents the central nations, primarily China. And the vital, hidden roots at the bottom, that's the Korean peninsula, which was historically referred to as Haehadong. The speaker insists this blueprint literally dictates the energetic role each region is meant to play.
Now, because humanity had basically grown completely chaotic, the framework claims the universe had to step in and initiate what it calls pruning, or junji jagop in Korean. Think about an actual gardener dealing with a massive overgrown tree. To save it, you don't just give it some extra water, right? You aggressively cut back the dead branches to stimulate proper, healthy growth. The framework claims the universe had to apply this exact, drastic kind of reorganization to the human population.
And this is where the theory takes its cosmological lens and applies it directly to real-world history in a rather stark way. Impartially speaking, the source proposes that World War I and World War II weren't just tragic geopolitical conflicts. Instead, they were literal cosmic pruning events. They were designed by the universe to forcibly reset society, burn away the dead wood, and lay down a foundation for global institutions, like the UN, to try and force some order upon a totally chaotic world.
Moving right along to Phase 3, the root nation and Hongik Ingan.
Following that devastating global pruning, the framework zeroes right in on the demographics left behind to rebuild. The speaker points out a very specific mathematical contrast that emerged in the mid-20th century. You had roughly 3 billion people left in the general global population, the branches and the trunk, but exactly 30 million people left on the Korean peninsula, the roots. The source argues this absolutely wasn't a coincidence, but deliberate cosmic design. To back up this mathematical claim, the 30 million figure is anchored historically to South Korea's first president, Syngman Rhee. When the new republic was formed, he famously addressed his 30 million compatriots in a national broadcast. Now, according to this esoteric framework, while President Rhee was speaking purely politically, he was actually unwittingly signaling a cosmic starting point. He was officially announcing to the universe that the roots were in place and ready to begin their work. So do the math there, and you get a pretty striking ratio of 1 to 100, or il-dong-baek in Korean.
Because there were 30 million people in the root nation and 3 billion out in the rest of the world, the framework believes every single person from the root nation is cosmically tasked with doing the spiritual and intellectual work of 100 people globally. I mean, just imagine carrying that immense burden of responsibility.
So what exactly is that responsibility? Well, these 30 million people are described as the vital root nation. Their descendants are destined to be Hongik Ingan, which is an old traditional term repurposed here to mean specially equipped global leaders whose sole purpose is to benefit all mankind. Following the wars, this root nation was meant to aggressively absorb all the world's newly distributed knowledge, metabolize it, and most importantly, organize it to provide a unified, harmonious direction for the rest of humanity.
Which leads us to Phase 4, the approaching Great Transition.
But things definitely did not go according to plan. The source asserts that these designated leaders ultimately failed. They absorbed the global knowledge, sure, but they only used it to become successful for themselves, totally failing to organize it for humanity. Because of this, the 70% growth phase ended, triggering a modern pruning era. The timeline plots it out like this. Humanity officially hit that completion mark on December 21, 2012. We were then given a 12-year grace period from 2013 to 2024 to get our act together. But because we haven't figured things out, we are now locked into an urgent, unavoidable 3-year reorganization window spanning from 2025 to 2027.
And that brings us right to the core thesis of the source material. The timeline zeroes in with absolute laser precision on the year 2026. Specifically, it points to the summer months of June and July, tying those dates right into traditional lunar calendar markers. The speaker claims this specific window is the absolute peak of this modern restructuring. It's the top of the mountain, the exact moment when the cosmic pressure to reorganize society, whether that's through social upheaval, economic shifts, or other massive global changes, will literally be at its most intense.
So, whether you're viewing this highly specific cosmology as a genuine spiritual warning, or maybe just a really fascinating metaphor about human interconnectedness, it leaves us with a deeply compelling final thought. If a grand, unavoidable reorganization of human society really is upon us, how are you preparing for it? Are we all just going to keep absorbing information like we always have, or are we actively organizing our lives and our knowledge for the greater good? It's a heavy question to consider. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep organizing, and I'll catch you in the next one.